The zone is a desolate and dangerous place located around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Most people know of the infamous nuclear disaster that took place in 1986, but in the Stalker universe there's more than meets the eye. During the 1960s, the Soviet government was doing all kinds of experiments in the area, mainly aimed at the control of consciousness. Enormous amounts of resources were invested in this research and new laboratories were built even into the 80s. The nuclear disaster had a massive impact on the world and especially on the vicinity of the power plant, with mass evacuations as a result. Despite all of this, it also offered a good opportunity for the scientists to continue their research in isolation. This research continued for years. From 2001, the exclusion zone and the city of Pripyat started getting more and more attention from the outside world. Reports started coming in that strange phenomena are taking place that defy the laws of physics and strange creatures are spotted. After a bus full of tourists disappeared, the Ukrainian government decided to shut down the entire zone from the outside world. Research continued and slowly but surely the affected area started getting larger and even the weather started to change. Hurricane winds and tremors, unusual for the area, began to emerge until everything resulted in a climax in 2006. This event is known as the second disaster. Multiple blinding lights appeared that lasted for hours and many of the witnesses who observed it became blind. A series of unexplainable events happened, from the blinding lights to massive thunder crashes to large earthquakes, and most of the scientific and military presence in the area died. A new zone was born out of this emission and the military moved in to put an end to it with nuclear weapons. This new zone had an extremely hostile environment and most of the under-equipped military was killed by anomalies and smaller emissions before they even reached their goal. This sets the stage for the zone that Stalker GAMMA takes place in. The actual lore goes much deeper than this, but now you have a basic understanding of what it is without giving away too much. In the years following these events, more and more people entered the zone, all of them with their own motivations and objectives. These different groups of people make up the different factions that exist there today, and when you start the game you can choose which faction you would like to join as. Essentially, Stalker GAMMA is the ultimate sandbox hardcore survival experience in this zone, and you can make up your own adventure against the backdrop of this lore. There are 9 factions to choose from at the start. I will focus only on these. There's actually more factions you can unlock later. A faction is a group of individuals that share a common interest and have certain relationships with other factions. In the large exclusion zone, they have set up different home bases with influence and control over certain areas. Some factions share interests with other factions, which make them allies and gives you access to certain other parts of the zone. Other factions are in conflict and this will make access and progression harder. First, let's take a shot of vodka and discuss the 3 I recommend for new players. The first one is the Loner faction. This is the classic stalker who comes to the zone for his own personal reasons. In essence, this is not a true faction. They are a loose alliance of like-minded individuals and more like a brotherhood. The Loners have a few bases to pick from, but I recommend Rookie Village for your first playthrough. This dilapidated place is located near the border of the zone, not far from a military checkpoint. Some experienced stalkers by the name of Wolf and Fanatic are running this village, and they prepare new stalkers for the dangers ahead. They have spent a large part of their lives in the zone, and they don't want newbies to make the same mistakes if they have witnessed lots of suffering. As far as I know, it's the only faction with a tutorial mission. You can speak to Fanatic about it, who is happy to help. This mission is quite bare bones however, so if you feel really inclined to try another faction, please feel free to do so. Rookie Village is in Cordon, which is a relatively safe area, but don't underestimate it. The presence of the military border control keeps things relatively in check, but bandits and mutants do roam the area. The Loners have a decent number of allies as well as enemies. Since they don't have a strong ideology, such as other factions like Freedom or Judy, they can live on a neutral basis with them. The military, however, with their goal to shut off the zone from the outside world, is hostile to their presence. The same goes for the bandits who prey on other factions for their personal gain. Not too far away, deep in the swamps, there is a second faction I recommend for new players. This one's called Clear Sky. It's a part scientific, part military organization whose goal is to understand the zone and where it came from. It used to be large and have many members, but it was almost completely wiped out during a visit to the reactor 7 years ago. Since most of the members died, the local bartender Cole took over and is the current leader. He managed to restore Clear Sky to almost its former glory, and he is a respected man. It might seem strange that the former bartender took over, but we're talking about the zone. He was heavily involved in difficult negotiations smuggling goods into the zone and was deemed fit for the position by the others. Just outside their base location, it's quite a dangerous area with all of the mutants, renegades and bandits, but then is there truly a safe place in the zone? This faction is not interested in turf wars with the other factions and for this reason has quite a few allies. Clear Sky's gear is better than that of the loners and due to the faction's neutral stance toward others, it's a good pick for new players. So if you feel sympathy towards Clear Sky's motivation, why not join them as a volunteer? As the zone is a unique phenomenon in the world, not only one group of scientists is attracted to the area. There's another scientific organization, officially sponsored by the Ukrainian government to do research in the zone. These are the ecologists. Headed by the veteran researcher Professor Sakharov, who actually participated during the first expeditions into the zone, the ecologists have their base located in a bunker in Yantar. The organization is fully committed to researching and understanding the mutants, artifacts and other mysteries of the zone. As opposed to Clear Sky, this organization is not militaristic and prefers a pacifist approach. But are their intentions just? Professor Sakharov mentions he's happy with the results of commercializing mutant parts for selling them in the outside world. In order to further their research but also for the protection, this organization works closely together with other factions such as Judy, the military and the mercenaries. This means that playing as this faction you can access large parts of the zone, so if you prefer a pacifist approach and you would like to explore and understand the zone better, this would be your ideal pick. Next up are the mid-tier factions. These factions are a bit harder for new players as their bases are located deeper into the zone. Not only will they have to deal with more dangerous mutants, but the number of enemy factions is higher too due to conflicting interests. To make up for this, these factions tend to have better weapons and equipment. There's one group of professional fighters that can't be missing in such an environment, and these are the mercs or mercenaries. No one really knows who hired them and why they are even there. Headed by a secretive man called Dushman, this faction consists of people that are in the zone for cold hard cash. It's a group of private military contractors that have specialized military grade gear, and if you like to roleplay as someone hired to go into the zone, this would be your pick. The members of this faction are from a diverse background, many of them foreigners that left the military of their respective countries in search for better pay. Many of them are special forces or Spetsnaz. The HQ of this faction is located in Dead City, deep within the zone. Many mercenaries, however, are on contracts throughout the zone and they have set up smaller outposts in different locations. Due to their proximity to the dangers of the zone, it isn't an easy faction, but at the same time they have very strong weapons and equipment. The mercenaries have a hostile relationship with the loners as well as with the military. They are neutral towards Clear Sky, the ecologists and even the bandits, however. When the military moved in to shut down the zone with nuclear weapons after the second disaster, it got wiped out. The soldiers that survived had to fend for themselves. Heavily traumatized, they started their own faction. It's called Judy. This paramilitary organization is waging war against the zone itself. They believe the zone is a danger to humanity and must be kept in check at all costs, including everything that spawned from it, such as the mutants. Not only that, they also wage war against the bandits and Monolith faction, so to prevent them from taking too much control in the zone. Due to their military background, discipline is highly regarded, but the faction was brought to shame in the past. As General Voronin mentions, one of their members was caught selling weapons to the bandits, and this person was not caught by Judy themselves, but by one of their neutral factions. This embarrassed the faction, and it's now trying to restore discipline and order. Due to their shared interest, this faction is on a friendly basis with the military. On top of that, they closely cooperate with the ecologists, as they believe their findings will help them destroy the zone in the long term. Their base is located in a makeshift barracks in Rostock. So if you feel like their motivations are a goal worth fighting for, why not join them as a volunteer? Judy has an archenemy though, which brings us to the next faction, which is called Freedom. Freedom consists of anarchists who believe that the zone should be open to anyone and it's a miracle that needs to be shared. According to one of their founders, Lukács, the zone hurts and kills everyone who opposes it, but believes that the zone does create opportunities for people too. It will leave you alone as long as you respect it. Many people who don't belong in the outside world come here to find a new life and leave with more than they entered with. They believe that the zone is something that shouldn't be attacked and destroyed, but humanity needs to find a way to live together with it. While Judy is very militaristic and rigid, Freedom is the opposite of that. Their members can be disciplined when needed, but in general they are more laid back in their time off. Due to conflicting interests, the military is also highly hostile to Freedom. If you choose Freedom, you can pick a couple of different locations to deploy at, but their main base is located at Army Warehouse. Due to their beliefs, they have quite a few allied factions, even bandits and mercs, but the factions that want to deny access to the zone are definitely their enemy. This brings us to the hardest tier of factions to play as. The first one are the bandits. Encountered in many locations and considered a threat by almost all across the zone, this faction consists of criminals that use the lawlessness of the zone for their own interest. The bandits' main base, called the Citadel, is located in Dark Valley and is led by a criminal called Sultan. When this man was still living in the outside world, his friend got killed by his drug dealer. After getting revenge, he went in and out of jail, finally deciding to enter the zone as disenchanted he was with the outside world. He started a gang of bandits and his life reflects on the culture within the faction, a culture of suspicion. The bandits trust no one and only tolerate the freedom and mercenary factions. Even among bandits themselves there's mistrust. They're hostile to many other factions and this means you will face a lot of fights if you will play as them. Since they are scavengers, thieves and robbers rather than a government-sponsored organization, their weapons and gear are pretty low tier, so prepare for difficult fights. In the early days of the zone, the only faction that was present was pretty much the Ukrainian military. Nowadays they have lost control as the other factions control significant territory. The real question is if they ever had any control at all. While exploring the zone, the hardship that the military has faced in the past is evident everywhere you go. Currently their main base is located at Agroprom Research Facility. The government decided to restrict access to the zone and the head of operations, Colonel Kuznetsov, is given the orders to kill everyone on sight. The military is friendly to only two other factions, the Ecologist because they are a government-sponsored research organization, and Judy because they share the same interests as well as a similar history. The government has multiple outposts and checkpoints across the zone, so you do have the opportunity to deploy in different locations. As this is the military, the weapons and equipment they have access to is strong. This isn't a luxury considering the hostility towards almost everyone. Then finally there's the last faction that I will cover and this is Monolith. This is arguably the hardest as well as the strongest faction to play. It is a cult that is hostile to all other factions for reasons that spoil a lot of the lore, so look that up elsewhere. I don't want to give away too much information about this to still give it a sense of mystery. They have no allies and are located in a dangerous part of the zone. It's essentially a brainwashed religious cult, so if you feel like that is your cup of tea, you could always try this faction. However, this is definitely not recommended for new players. So guys, hopefully this will give you a bit of a background on the Stalker GAMMA world and the different actors that play a role in it. There are actually more factions you can unlock, but this is plenty of information to get you started. I had no idea where to begin or what to do when I started playing, and even though this story contains some spoilers, I think it will make a lot more sense for you. Choose the faction that you feel most inclined to play. There's actually another YouTuber that I learned a lot from in terms of mechanics, as the mod itself doesn't explain that much, except for the documentation in the PDA in your inventory you can read through. So if you want to watch more in-depth information such as beginner guides, explanations about the health or repair system, check out the Youtuber Bandanner. His content helped me out a lot, so shout out. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one, guys.